5 days awake with insane hallucinations. A 3-MeO-PCE trip report by the Angry Little Bunny. Posted to earwid.org June 2nd, 2020. Earwid note. The doses described in this report are potentially life-threatening. The amount taken is beyond a heavy dose and could pose serious health risks or result in unwanted, extreme effects. Doses such as this have been known to cause hospitalizations and/or deaths. Sometimes, extremely high doses reported are errors rather than actual doses used. This is a report about the worst psychosis I have ever had from any drug, and I wouldn't be lying if I would say that this was probably the most horrifying experience in my entire life, and I did not think I would survive it. I've used a few dissociative drugs in the past. I mainly was addicted to plain PCE for 2 or 3 months, during which I got a psychosis 2 times, which each lasted 2 weeks, and were horrifying. After a few months of abstinence, I occasionally used 3-MeO-PCE again, which overall feels extremely similar to PCE. I don't think I could tell any difference. I maybe used it once or twice a week. 5 milligrams would give me light effects which would just make me feel a bit floaty and elevate my mood. After a long abstinence, 15 milligrams already felt really strong. I just get a really typical stimulating and manic dissociation. But tolerance increased quickly, and I soon needed 25 milligrams after a few times, and soon even 40 milligram plus. I would almost consistently get what I call the Alice in Wonderland syndrome, which only occurred rarely with PCE, but I attribute that to permanent changes in my brain, and not the drug. I thought I would be safe from a psychosis if I only use it every few days, but I guess I was wrong. One Thursday evening, maybe 10 PM, I took about 30 milligrams intranasal, and after an hour I didn't really feel a satisfying effect, so I increased the dose to maybe a bit more than 40 milligrams over 2 to 3 hours, which was a dose I took multiple times before. However, the effects were still unsatisfying, and at maybe 4 AM I attempted to sleep, but it was impossible. Towards the morning, I get pretty strong anxiety. I looked in the mirror thinking my face looked extremely deformed and ugly. It was so bad I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. The day went on, and in the evening I had to go to a course. I still didn't feel a bit tired, and the course went from 5:30 PM to 9 PM. On the way there I listened to some Japanese anime music, and when I took the headphones off in the course, the music seemed to have burnt itself into my brain, and I was still hearing it silently, which was extremely annoying and scary. I'm pretty sure this was already the psychosis setting in, because when I looked around, I thought everyone looked better than me. I felt worthless. I also started to occasionally see rainbow-coloured lines around objects. On the train ride home, I suddenly heard a repetitive wow 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 sound, and I thought someone was playing some weird music on loud in the train, because it would go away when I plugged my ears. I tried to ignore this and the slight hallucinations, thinking I just needed to sleep it off. When I got out of the train and walked home, the wow wow sound followed me, which absolutely terrified me. I understood now that if I would hear any noise, it would trigger this sound. I was so terrified that I took 1 milligram of Xanax and slept on the couch where my mum was reading. Overall, I slept about 4 hours, but the most horrifying thing happened after that. When I woke up, the hallucinations had extremely intensified. I saw rainbow-coloured blinking lines and geometric patterns everywhere. When I would rub my eyes, I would see extremely complex, rainbow-coloured fractal patterns changing and eventually disappearing in hundreds of blue pixels that would cover my field of vision for a few seconds, even when I opened my eyes. I tried to cope with it by trying to accept that I have to live with these patterns now. I mean, they look kinda pretty, I guess. When I would take a walk, there were moving patterns in vivid rainbow colours everywhere, almost like as if I had taken a strong dose of some psychedelic drug. I couldn't accept that, because the next night I still couldn't sleep at all. I later was convinced that it was a brain lesion and asked my parents to bring me to a hospital. There, I asked the neurologist for an MRI scan, for which he gave me an appointment, but after describing the symptoms, he also said he's pretty sure it is a psychosis. Afterwards, we went to a psychiatric hospital because I hoped they could help me sleep. I got there at maybe afternoon and then just lied in bed seeing crazy, fractal hallucinations everywhere. I was sure I permanently fucked myself up, and I thought I'd probably have to commit suicide after I get out of here. At about 3 AM I went to a nurse telling her I couldn't sleep. I overall annoyed the staff a lot in my psychotic state. She gave me a 40mg tablet of prothependal, an antipsychotic medication. I lay back down in my bed, but soon after that my ears felt like they were closing. I was terrified. I got up and found that I was walking as if I had consumed over 2 litres of alcohol. It was really difficult. Went back outside to the nurse because I was so terrified, and she was just really annoyed that I still wouldn't sleep. I told her that I wanted to go home, but she said I had to wait until 10 AM to leave. I spent the night drinking as much water as I can to try to flush out the prothependal and ask my parents to just please take me home. I was extremely depressed on the way home. I was sure I would be completely unfunctional for the rest of my life from this time on. I thought the dose of 3-MeO-PCE destroyed the sleeping part of my brain, and the only way to fix me was to have a surgery where they would implant a new sleeping part in my brain. That's how far gone I was. At home, my mum gave me 2 milligrams of Xanax, but even after 3 nights without sleep, I still could not fall asleep and just started to panic. During the day, I would hear the wow, wow, wow sound, plus police sirens in the background, and I would even get these little light flashes all over my field of vision. I was so terrified, I told my dad, "My God, the 3-MeO-PCE, it's eating holes in my brain right now and I just want it to kill me as quickly as it can." I even told my parents my password to my phone so they can tell my friend that I died, because I was sure I was going to die in a few days from now. Me and my dad eventually went back to the hospital after 4 nights of no sleep. I felt extremely awake and anxious in the hospital. A psychiatrist there suggested I should take 2.5 milligrams of lorazepam with 4 milligrams of tizanidine every 30 minutes with relaxing music up to 3 times until I fall asleep. So, my dad got the prescription for these 2 drugs, and we went home. Towards the evening I felt extremely tired and kinda stiff. When I looked around I would get strong after images, but it was still impossible to sleep. It felt like there was a mental block preventing me to even enter the half asleep state when I lie down. At 10 PM, my dad gave me the first 2.5 milligrams of lorazepam with 4 milligrams of tizanidine while putting on some meditative music. The experience was quite nice while I laid there and the drugs started working. I felt like I was spinning slowly and floating down. 30 minutes later, I got the same 2 drugs again, and another 30 minutes later I got another 2.5 milligram of lorazepam with 150 milligrams of trazodone. But I still couldn't sleep, and started to really freak out. About 2 to 3 hours after the first dose, I convinced my dad to give me another 2.5 milligrams of lorazepam. I slept maybe a minute before a horrific nightmare woke me up. I had 10 milligrams of lorazepam plus other sedating drugs in my body with almost 5 days of no sleep, and I still couldn't sleep. This freaked me out extremely. I cannot really remember what I did next, but apparently I stumbled into my room and took whatever I thought could put me to sleep. Apparently, I even took some Datura seed which I collected last summer, but never touched after that. My parents drove me back to the hospital and apparently I was awake and talking the entire time. But I remember nothing. I only slowly came back to me when I was brought into the hospital in a wheelchair. But first, I actually thought I was dreaming. I literally, and this is no word of a lie, thought I was dreaming about the hospital. I told the doctors that I took 7 grams of Datura seeds and 30 grams of amobarbital when they asked me. They obviously were terrified, because I would absolutely be dead if I took that. I was put on a hospital bed, and there I slowly realised that this was real. And only later my parents texted me what happened, as I had no idea. I was on a heart rate monitor, and my heart rate was at about 120 with high blood pressure. The doctor who watched over me told me to stop moving and lie still to not get a heart attack. I still had slight hallucinations from the Datura, which still were minor compared to the psychosis. Basically, I often would barely recognise the room I was looking at as a room. Everything in my visual field just seemed like random shapes to me. Sometimes the walls changed colour and the room filled with mist, but this went away over a few hours and I was left with the usual hallucinations. The time in the hospital was horrible. When I would move around or shake my pillow, I would hear entire conversations from the sound. I would hear voices in the sound of blowing wind plus the wow, wow sound, and police siren sounds in the background. Towards the night, I got 25 milligrams of melperone at 10 PM, which is a pretty mild antipsychotic which again didn't help me sleep at all. At 2 AM in the bed is where the hallucinations turned interesting. I could literally pick them up with my fingers. I was almost convinced I was able to see some kind of invisible energy of sorts. I even tried to photograph the hallucinations with my phone and was surprised when they also showed up on the photos. When I looked at them later, the hallucinations, well, they were obviously gone. At 3 AM, a rather nice nurse came to my room and after I told her I still couldn't sleep despite the melperone, she gave me 10 milligrams of zolpidem and she brought me to another room. I was sure this wouldn't help, but to me, a complete surprise, I actually fell asleep for 2 to 3 hours. For the first time in a long time, I had hope again after that. In the afternoon of the next day, I was discharged, but I still had the hallucinations and audio distortions and was really struggling to sleep. For the next week, I was just extremely lethargic and felt horrible during the day, but it slowly got better. After a few days out of the hospital, the visual hallucinations went away. I then had the MRI, which came back, lo and behold, completely fine. Then, the wow, wow and siren sounds subsided. And now, almost 3 weeks after this started, I still have slight trouble sleeping, and I took lorazepam for sleep the last few days. But I must say, it's getting better, and I'm almost back to normal. I thought benzodiazepine withdrawals were bad, but this was so much more horrifying. Even during benzo withdrawal, I could sleep a bit each night, and I at least knew exactly what it was. I never ever want to take dissociative drugs again, or most addictive drugs for that matter. A psychosis from dissociatives which are stimulating and have a potency close to PCP, such as PCE, 3-MeO-PCE or 3-MeO-PCP, is probably the most horrifying drug experience one can have, and I could easily see how I might have committed suicide during any of this.